Good afternoon, and thank you for welcoming Beyond Plastic Bermuda. Today we are joined with three members of Beyond Plastic Bermuda, Katie Berry from Keep Bermuda Beautiful, and Eric Hetzel from Bermuda Environmental Sustainability Task Force, and me, McLean Smith, a volunteer with Beyond Plastic. We are so excited to host our first of 4 webinars in collaboration with the BEDC and Bank of Butterfield. The first webinar will cover the perils of plastic, the health, environmental, and social effects that can arise from single-use plastic exposure. And most importantly, why you should care. Firstly, a little bit about BPB, or Beyond Plastic Bermuda. It is a campaign that was spearheaded in 2021 by Keep Bermuda Beautiful and the Bermuda Environmental Sustainability Task Force. We now operate with around 12 volunteer team members that have experience in the environmental sector, education, retail, legislation, and marketing. We started Beyond Plastic Bermuda with 4 key areas in mind. These areas all collaborate with each other and allow us to meet all of our goals in our community. The first being innovation. This is creating new plastic-free products and developing alternative business models to avoid single-use plastics. The second is education. This means supporting our community in understanding why eliminating SUPs is necessary. Thirdly, inspiration. BPB is hoping to inspire a culture shift where our community can embrace new models of sustainability. And lastly, legislation. Our team actively researches other jurisdictions globally to advise government on what the best and most appropriate course of action is here in Bermuda. Just a bit of background on plastic itself. It didn't become part of our daily lives until the 1950s, and since then it has exploded into all industries and into every sector of our lives. With 50% of plastic produced being single-use plastic, this increases the waste stream enormously, so much so that we dump 8 million tons of plastic into the oceans every year. That's equivalent to roughly a garbage truck of plastic every minute. And according to the Ellen MacArthur Foundation, there will be more plastic in our oceans than fish by 2050. Another big fact is that by the year 2050, plastic manufacturing and processing may account for as much as 20% of petroleum consumed globally, and that's 15% of the annual carbon emissions budget worldwide, making plastic consumption a significant contributor to climate change. It is also worth noting that due to recent events in Russia and Ukraine, there are reports that the ban on Russian oil will lead to an increase in the price of plastic, since oil is a major ingredient in plastic resin. Now that I've explained what the plastic footprint is currently, it is estimated to double within the next 20 years. In 2016, there was equivalent to 330 million tons, meaning that by 2036, there will be 660 million tons. And that's about 82 garbage trucks of plastic every minute. And with such a large waste stream, it's important to understand that plastic does not go away. You can see in the photo right here, this was taken by one of our team members. She found it in Bermuda. It is the polypropylene lining of a plastic coffee cup after the paper biodegraded. And almost every single coffee cup is lined with plastic. This is to keep hot liquids in. And that's it for me, and I'm going to pass the mic to Eric Hetzel from BEST to talk about the material details of plastic.
Thank you, McLean.
Thank you.
So I think most people are aware that plastic starts as very large items, whether that be a plastic bottle or a tray, plastic food tray, but and then it breaks down because we've all seen the bits of plastic on the beach. But what a lot of people don't realize is that microplastics are actually contained in products that you're purchasing and putting on your body or into the environment directly. So this is another source of plastics that a lot of people are not aware of. In addition, those macroplastics can break down into even smaller bits called nanoplastics, And nanoplastics also are actually contained directly in products. And these products are especially, cleansers and cosmetics and things. The critical thing to know about nanoplastics is that because they're so small, they can actually be absorbed directly into your cells and increasing your exposure directly. So where does plastic impact us? We've kind of broken it down into 5 major areas: the environment, climate change, there's economic impacts, social justice, and human health. So it's not just about birds ingesting and turtles ingesting plastic, although that is a major concern of ours as well, because ingestion of plastic leads to suffocation and digestive problems, and the chemicals that are in plastics leach out into the water and into the animals. That also causes harmful effects on those animals. It's also important to realize that those plastics are all made from petroleum-based substances. So this is a major concern of ours. And as McLean said, 8 million tons of plastic winds up in our ocean every year. So it's a huge, huge impact environmentally. The other area that we're being impacted is climate change, because if plastics was a country, it'd be the 5th highest greenhouse gas emitter in the world. So that's a huge amount of carbon that's going into our environment related to production and use of plastics. So much so that by 2050, it's estimated that 20% of our petroleum consumed and 15% of our greenhouse gas will be produced by plastic or plastic production. So this is a huge impact on climate change. Just the bottled water is equivalent to 450 million barrels of oil a year. So this climate change is also a big factor with plastic. The other thing that a lot of people are not aware of is that there's an economic issue with plastic. And as you know, trash, it costs to pick up trash. So the more trash we produce as a society, the more it's costing people to pick that trash up. Also, a certain amount of trash leaks into the environment as litter, and some leaks from the terrestrial environment into the marine environment. Those have costs association. So it's affecting plant life, it affects fisheries productions in the environment, and then we're going to talk about it in a second, there's a healthcare cost associated with plastic. So all these costs start to add up, and they're being passed along to you by manufacturers, unfortunately. So rather than the manufacturer having to pay these costs, which, and obviously manufacturing costs would be passed on to the consumer, but rather than the consumer paying them at the point of sale, they're being passed along to the broad public. In addition, if you live near the points of extraction, refinement, and production or disposal of plastic, then you're paying an even greater cost. And we'll talk about that more on the next slide. So much so that the true cost of plastic is actually estimated to be 10 times the initial cost. So this is an issue with plastic. So a lot of times people will say, well, this plastic item is less expensive. Well, it's not, because what's hidden in there is a huge tenfold price increase that other people are having to pay for that product. So this is important to understand. There is a way to recoup that money. It's called extended producer responsibility. We won't talk about it here, but think of a deposit bill would be a version of a extended producer responsibility. So that's one way that these costs can be recouped. Now, there is what they call a social justice or an environmental justice issue with plastics as well. And by consuming more plastics, we are a part of that system, so that at the points of extraction, production, use, and disposal, the people that live in those communities next to those facilities, they pay a much higher cost because they're bearing the burden of the pollution or effects thereof that are caused by plastic production. And so this is, an inherent unfairness of the system, if you will. So this is another issue of why we have to address plastic production. And so moving forward, there are 7 general types of plastic. We're not gonna go through them in depth here. It's just important to understand that all types of plastic have some chemicals in them that are impacting the environment and human health. And that's pretty critical to understand when you realize that the average person, based on one study out of Australia, has suggested that everyone is ingesting, on average, this is a global average, of course, a credit card's worth of microplastics every week. A lot of that comes from water that you're drinking, especially if you're drinking out of a plastic water bottle, and there's other major sources as well. And so it might be a little bit more or a little bit less. This is a global average. But regardless, everyone is consuming microplastics, and those plastics are unfortunately very likely having an impact on you. So much plastics are becoming so ubiquitous in the environment that microplastics are even been found in human placenta. So this is impacting unborn children as well. So there is a long list, and we're not going to just go through them one by one here, of health impacts. It's just important to understand that there are huge health impacts of plastics, because plastics are made with chemicals, and those chemicals have endocrine disrupting properties, so they're called endocrine disrupting compounds, EDCs, and those affect hormones, which are the controlling substances in your body. So they control development and a host of other issues. So the last one we are going to talk about, though, is infertility. There's a book that came out at the end of last year, but I'd encourage you to get, or there's several webinars that are available online. You should get that book and read it, or watch one of the webinars, because plastics, the chemicals, again, found in plastics, are directly linked to potential causes in male fertility and female fertility declines. So much so that they saw a 52% decline in fertility in men and women, actually, separately, between 1973 and 2011. This author, Shana Swan, she actually says that she approached this study as a skeptic, but she was completely turned around, and so much so that she wrote this book. So this is a huge health impact. And now I'd like to turn it over to Katie Berry.
Hang on, of course I'm having problems changing it over, and there we go. So hi everyone. So, is it just dropped off my screen?
Yeah. So you can go back to your Canva presentation.
Yeah, no, I'm not having success today with the Canva. So have you got it now?
Yes.
Okay, thanks. So in 2018, there was in the throne speech, there was the mention of the elimination of SUPs. And I think this caught everyone a little bit by surprise, but certainly the environmentalists, it was a pretty exciting moment. This was then derailed by COVID due to the increase in use of SUPs when we were trying to figure out how COVID was transmitted and for hygienic reasons. So we then move forward, and David Northcott, who's the government policy writer, put together a policy paper on single-use plastics, and that was released in August of 2021, and there was a 3-month public consultation process. Since then, the minister has expressed the intention that phase 2, which would prohibit certain SUPs, will begin in 2022, and there'll be a period of time where stockists can use up their current stock, but we are expecting by the end of 2022 that certain items will be prohibited from sale, distribution, and use. It'll probably be the easier items to start with. The government has set out a phased approach, or they at least speak about a phased approach, which is expected to continually relook at the items that are being banned and to add more items as people get used to moving away from single-use plastic. So
Katie,
the
you've
item,
covered up your screen, just so you know.
oh, sorry.
There you go.
So what, is that better?
Yes.
Okay, good. So what are the items? Well, there are plastic water bottles, plastic drink bottles, styrofoam containers, plastic single serving containers, the ones that you often see used for ketchup, but also the single serve food ones for ketchup and mustard and things like that. Plastic utensils, plastic lined paper cups, which includes coffee cups, the plastic stemmed cotton buds, products with microplastics in them. I think Eric mentioned before, these are things like body scrubs that have plastics in them to have some kind of abrasive feel to them. Plastic cups, so all those red Solo cups will go. Plastic bags, and also on the list is biodegradable and oxo-degradable products. You're probably wondering what those are, and these are items that are part of greenwashing, where product manufacturers have tried to get clever, and the majority of the product will be made of cardboard or paper or something like that. So greenwashing is kind of a term that's used to describe eco-friendly products that are being made for economical gain. On the left, you'll see that there are circles with common brands that that you might recognize, but these are not actually regulated. And the brands that you see are the one that you're looking for, the ones that have the sticker on the right-hand side, sorry, the left-hand side ones are not regulated. The ones on the right, that is an Austrian system that says it's okay for home compostables, that is what you're really looking for when you're looking for products. And what we're kind of finding is that there are a lot of products that are supposedly green, but in fact, they are lined with a very thin coating of plastic. And so quite often around the islands, business will feel like they're doing the right thing, but in fact, that item is, it may be predominantly paper or cardboard, but it is lined in plastic. And in the environment, that functions in just the same way as plastic does. So you really want to look for the Austrian home okay to be compostable, because there's also, you will see that things will say that they're compostable on them, but actually they're only compostable in an industrial composting facility. And that is usually a sign that they're lined in plastic. Presently, there is no US standard for compostability. And that's really how we find out whether a product has plastic in it or not. So you might think that plastic recycling is the way forward. Why doesn't Bermuda recycle plastic? Well, it's kind of a myth. And, you know, we were kind of sold this idea that if we all sorted out our trash and sent plastic, that it could be recycled. But in fact, only 9% of plastic has been recycled of all of the millions of tons of plastic which have been made since the beginning of production, which was in about the 1950s. So plastic is actually a product that doesn't recycle well. It degrades whenever you try and make it into a new product, and becomes more unstable, really. And so this lack of stability means that it's not a good product for being a candidate for recycling. The other part of the thing, the sort of the model was that the US and Europe and the UK, they were sending their plastic recycling to Indonesia and China. And the plastic was getting there, and they were burning it either through incineration or in open incinerators, very different from our incinerator, and people were getting sick. And so Indonesia said, enough, we're not taking it anymore. And so the US started trying to ship it to Africa and to Central America. So this is obviously hugely problematic. And so there's about to be an international law that will prevent countries from shipping plastic to other countries in order to not, because they're saying that they're recycling, but actually they're not. And so there's been real pushback on this in the wider community. So plastic recycling is just not a solution. So how do Bermudians feel about the upcoming legislation? So all the conversations that we've been having, all the research that we've been looking at is Bermudians are really supportive of this legislation. So we had a Bermuda College student who did a survey, and it was really encouraging to see that over 92% of people felt that pollution was bad for the environment and bad for humans. So this is something that Bermudians are behind, and that's encouraging. So what we really have to do now is relook at our business models and try and figure out how to reduce the amount of plastic that we use, specifically single-use plastic. So what you do is how can you look at your business model and reduce the amount of SUPs? As individuals, how can we reduce the amount of SUPs and support businesses to move away from using plastic? So there are alternatives to single-use plastics that we can do. And check out the next slide. And the big thing is, as everyone says, you know, why is Bermuda doing this now? Well, the world is acting on this issue, and every day there is notification of another country that is passing plastic legislation. You've certainly seen in Europe, there's a real move that produce is not to be wrapped in plastic, and there's been bag bans for years. And so Bermuda is not the first to do this, and they're certainly not alone. And certainly we know that the manufacturers of a lot of these products are trying to work really hard to come up with solutions. And new products are coming on the line all the time. But really, it's not just about replacing one product with another. We really kind of need to look at the whole system and business models and work out like permanent solutions that are waste-free. So, you know, this is where we want to, at Beyond Plastic, help small businesses. And we want to work out permanent solutions. And we also want to praise the organizations that are doing this, that are making these changes. So get in touch with us, because we're here to help. And we want to shout about the organizations and promote the businesses that are making this change. So my thing is not wanting to change to the next slide. Wonder why that is. Hang on, everyone. There we go. So the big thing to really focus on is the whole idea of replacing, reusing, and refusing. So, you know, there are alternatives to plastic utensils, for example. There's lots of retailers in Bermuda that have great alternatives. Plastic bags, you know, we've been using reusable bags in our grocery stores for quite some time. There really isn't any need for plastic bags on an everyday basis. Coffee cups. Most of us attend the same coffee shop every single day and could take a reusable coffee cup. And then there is reusable containers for takeout. We all love Sargasso, but we do need to change the way that we do takeout in Bermuda. So to find out more about what we're doing, please follow us on Instagram. We have a website that's about to launch. There's new things that are coming online all the time. We're trying to share as much information as possible, but we're also available to small businesses and to individuals and retailers and whoever who wants some advice, who would like some help to kind of navigate what's coming. You know, we really don't need a handful of people doing zero waste perfectly. We need millions of people doing it imperfectly. I love this quote because it kind of demonstrates what Beyond Plastic is trying to do, is start with the easy things and then work up to the harder ones. And together we can get this done. So I really do encourage you to get in touch and we can help. We have 3 more webinars that are part of this series. So the next webinar is going to look at how to give up plastic. The third is looking at ways to embrace innovation in order to make changes that become a strength for your business. And lastly, the final webinar looks at ways your small business can work towards a better waste management model in Bermuda, because ultimately we do realize that with moving away from single-use plastic, that there are going to be other impacts. There's going to be more cans, there's going to be more glass. The brilliant thing about Bermuda is that we have great recycling programs for those two materials. And I do apologize. It is, I think I'm just going to stop that sharing. Thank you for joining all of us. And we're now actually going to answer questions. So if you want to put your questions in the chat, and then McLean, Eric, and I will answer them. So the first one here is, how do companies get away with using the greenwashing labels? Is that not considered false advertising? Eric, do you want to take that one?
I was just going on a rant yesterday about that. Yeah, because it is confusing. I visited a small cafe yesterday, and they were quite proud that they had these ecologically friendly coffee cups and some other items, but unfortunately I had to break the bad news is that they were all plastic lined, even though it said eco this and eco that on it. And well, I'm not going to show you this. I brought home a cup as well. And so is it false advertising? Yes. And it really should be considered false advertising, and it should be regulated, but it's not today anyway.
Yeah, and I think the thing is with the government is that they are aware of these products. And so I think that some will, the system will stop them being able to be imported into Bermuda. There's others that they're getting cleverer and cleverer with how they advertise it. And so, I mean, Eric knows more than anybody about plastic that I've ever met. And so any product that you're unsure about, you know what, get in touch with us, because we can figure it out whether it has plastic or not in it and help you navigate that so that you're not, you don't fall foul of the fact that there are these companies really trying very hard to greenwash. So the next question says, we always hear of new bacteria that are capable of digesting plastics or other extreme measures, but if this were a feasible option, I feel like it would be more widely expanded upon. Is there any access to journals or other information regarding this bacteria? Is there potential to destroy the plastics that we've already disposed of in this type of way? I understand that we want to stop single-use plastics, but what do we do about what already exists? Well, certainly in Bermuda, we do have an incinerator, and the plastic, KBB does an awful lot of beach cleanups, and the plastic goes to the incinerator. It's not a perfect system, but it is probably the best system that we have at the moment to deal with plastics, other than just choosing not to use them. Eric or McLean, do you have more to add about the bacteria? It's not something that I have specific knowledge about.
It is it's a huge area of research, and that is the area that a lot of companies are looking at. So whether they're using, in some cases, they're taking compounds that they know are biologically degradable by bacteria, common bacteria, and incorporating those into some kinds of plastic so that they can be attacked by bacteria. It's just an area that we continue to follow. It may be a place that research leads to some productive answers in the future. But I mean, we're really not there yet. It's early days.
Yeah, and I think the thing that we have to remember is that at the moment, plastic is toxic to humans. So actually, what is it doing to those bacteria and how is it affecting them? And so there's a part of it that I'm pretty skeptical about. And it seems to me that that's a stopgap to the actual solution, which is that we all need to rethink how we do things. And the reusable model is a far better model. So we have another one. Do you recommend using PEVA reusable storage bags as an alternative?
Yeah, PVA is a compound that we've looked at. I mean, I would need to do a bit more research. Maybe you could just contact us separately and we'll have a chat about PVA. But I think it probably will be accepted as an alternative. But and that's one thing that we should state here is that obviously we're not government. We don't know what government is or is not going to allow. They've said that they're not going to allow bioplastics. That's probably they've kind of overstated that a bit. And what they really meant was things like PLA, which is polylactic acid. And that's something that you'll see is industrially compostable and is used quite widely. Some of these other compounds are, okay in the environment, and there's some new ones coming out all the time. So I think, and I think PVA falls into that category.
Are you available to discuss business ideas for recycling plastics? So I think it depends what it is as far as recycling plastics. Ultimately, plastics recycling on a large scale is not something that we as a group support. But there are clever things. KBB just had an amazing art exhibition and it was all made out of plastic. So it depends kind of what type of recycling you're proposing. But we're open to discuss anything and everything. Wouldn't you agree, Eric and McLean?
I would say there's probably an opportunity there to recycle plastics that you find on cleanups and beaches. Maybe not make that the first initial idea of recycling plastics if you're, using it in your business and you're trying to find a way of disposing of it. But if they're already around and you're cleaning up a beach or a park and you're trying to get rid of them instead of incinerating them, then I don't see why that couldn't be part of an innovative idea.
Right. There are people using ocean plastics in products now, I know.
Yeah. But ultimately, you have to remember the health impacts of plastic.
Yeah.
Right.
And let's see what we've got next. Does this pertain to all plastic bottles, or will we still be able to purchase 3-liter bottles of water? So this is a good question. And I think, where we have an open dialogue with government about what is proposed, there is debate as to this particular issue. And certainly, I would have thought that the larger bottles of water would be allowed. I think that in the first instance, it's particularly the smaller single-use bottles of water, because those 3-liter bottles, actually, you could argue, are multi-use.
Yeah.
Eric, would you agree?
Yeah, I mean, again, though, back to the health impacts. I mean, water bottles are probably one of the biggest, contributors to microplastics, ingestion. So now it would be better in a bigger bottle. Yes. Would it be better? Yes. The worst offenders are those little small bottles because it's just, we just don't treat them very good. We throw them in our car, we leave them there, they get hot, we crinkle them up. I mean, some people might even reuse them thinking it's a good thing to reuse them because, you're reusing something, but in that case, it's not, a good thing because those bottles are made of something called PET. and it's not a good plastic to be ingesting. So yeah, I would agree that maybe there's room for a 3-liter bottle, but I still wouldn't recommend it. Those big bottles that you find in water coolers, for example, those are like 5 liters or bigger. Those carboys, they're made from polycarbonate plastic, which is a hard plastic. As long as that is free of a particular chemical called bisphenol, then that's okay, probably. So those will definitely still exist, I think.
Yeah. So the next question is it true that reusable bags can cause more plastic to be made, as they're often made of plastic and don't break down well when disposed of? Eric?
Yeah, I don't really follow the question.
So it's the idea that reusable bags, I guess the ones that are
Oh,
made
I'm
of a
sorry,
heavy
reusable bags.
duty or type of plastic, you know, it's a tricky one. Is, anything that you reuse is better, but replacing with a slightly heavier plastic bag is not really a great solution. It would be better if it was made out of something that lasted, like cotton or hemp or one of these other things.
Yeah, there's a lot of studies on this actually, about it's not just about the carbon. There's a lot of other issues involved in environmental issues. There's water usage, there's pollution that from manufacturing, and so the studies have looked at the life cycle, what they call a life cycle analysis of environmental impacts. And when they do those life cycle analysis, what they find is, yes, your reusable bag, you have to reuse it as many as, say, 400 times to break even on a plastic bag. But I mean, I've had bags. There's bags in my house that I've had 20 years. They're not pretty, but I can tell you I've used them probably 4,000 times, not 400. So as long as you reuse those bags and you keep using them, then it's a net sum gain. Reusing always wins as long as you reuse it. Yes, if you got one of those reusable bags and you threw it away every time, then that's a bad idea.
So the next question is, will single-use plastics be removed in phases? Yes, the government has said that there are phases to this. These first items are what they have intended for the first phase. The idea is that they may have different dates where it comes into effect. So it might be that there's a immediate ban on something like the cotton earbuds with the plastic, because actually most earbuds that you find in Bermuda are actually not made out of plastic. They have a cardboard center in the middle. So actually that's something that you could move away from immediately, and there wouldn't be an impact, because actually there is an alternative in the market that is commonly available in Bermuda already. Other items are a bit more complicated. And so there might be a longer lead time on those. We know from talking to the grocery stores that the styrofoam black containers that they put the meat on is something that's probably the #1 item that they don't want to be banned immediately, because they don't feel like there's a good alternative. There are different alternatives, but there are different things coming on all the time. So that might have a 12-month lead time until the ban comes into effect. So I think there's going to be this phased approach along with flexible dates as to when the ban comes into effect, depending on the item and depending on whether you can get alternatives or not.
But again, we can't speak for government, so.
Yes, this is our best guess given our conversations that we've had and what we've gleaned. And what we've recommended. We spent a lot of last year doing a lot of research and putting together an analysis of what other countries are doing and some recommendations, which we submitted to the minister. Was it just before Christmas or just after Christmas? My sense of time has gone completely. Just before. And that document kind of recommended that to the minister, that we had a phased approach with different dates in it.
Next question.
How about plastic spoons and plastic forks? Will these be disposed of as well or banned? Eric McLean?
McLean, why don't you field that one?
I understand that they're part of a list of things that will be eliminated. But I also think this is an opportunity for businesses, especially in the restaurant industry, to step up and start asking their consumers if they want plastic utensils with their takeout order before putting through the order. I know a lot of them automatically just throw them into the order because they assume the consumer on the other side needs them. We have a restaurant that we worked with previously, and they're currently the only restaurant on Sargasso that asks their consumers if they want utensils. So if you are a restaurant and you're listening in, or you are a business that gives out food, there's an opportunity there to put a platform on your Sargasso profile or your Food Hub profile and just ask your consumers if they want to add mustard, ketchup, mayonnaise, spoons, forks, etc.
So, McLean, why don't you tell them the percentage of the reduction in plastics? It was dramatic.
So in just 2 weeks, there was 176 utensils saved. And as I said, they're still the only restaurant that is asking their consumers. So I can imagine that number has increased dramatically.
Yeah, it's important to know that in California, they've recently passed legislation to require this. And studies there showed that restaurants that did it were saving, I believe it's on the order of $5,000 to $7,000, per year, and that's in the United States. So it's probably more here. So it makes good business sense.
Yeah, and this is something that businesses can do immediately, is to work with Sargasso to put the opt-in, opt-out for ketchup, mayonnaise, mustard, all of those things, napkins, and single-use cutlery, and to test the waters, because ultimately, if your customers don't want it, that's going to save you money.
Yeah.
And it's that kind of innovation that Beyond Plastic really wants to help small businesses navigate. Is, we're not interested in penalizing small businesses. Like, everybody wants all their favorite places to survive this. So in order to do that, part of it is trying to rethink our business models so that they work efficiently and they embrace this change and it becomes part of a business strength. Bermuda's small enough, and we have a really dynamic culture that kind of can embrace these kind of changes. And I really think that we could be a leader in these changes and showing other jurisdictions how small businesses have moved beyond single-use plastic. I think it's a pretty interesting time, and I think that is where the work needs to be, is to support, and it particularly it is kind of our takeout and our food and things like that is going to need support, because their businesses are impacted kind of immediately with this. But it's also the gas stations, it's the retailers, and we have examples in Bermuda where businesses have made the changes, and it is actually not been, it has been financially beneficial. So I don't have any more questions in the list. Eric, do you have anything further that you would like to say?
Well, no, I mean, yes, I do. So that made me think of, one thing that we've seen restaurants and some other purveyors of drinks do right away is to empty their coolers of plastic bottles. And any place that we've spoken to who's done that has seen no decrease in sales as a result. I mean, people are quite flexible when it comes to their beverages, and as long as it's cold, then they'll opt for another beverage. So it's an example of something that people are doing now to get ahead of the legislation. And so there's a lot we can do. So, and again, we look forward to working with anybody who, would like our assistance.
And part of our campaign is very much to work with individuals so that every Bermudian understands that they need to be part of the solution, because certainly when you see a coffee shop in town, there are people sitting at tables with disposable single-use coffee cups when in fact they could have a mug. And so part of this is not just on the business side, is we need Bermudians and individuals to ask for that change and change their behavior along with this, because it can't just fall on business, it can't just fall on legislation. It's kind of that magic place where everybody in the community comes together to make this change happen, because they believe it's for the benefit of all of us. I mean, certainly it is for our own health benefit. And it really is, when you see all the plastic washing up on our beaches at every high tide, you realize that we have to do something. We can't just sit back and say, you know what, we're waiting for the US to change, or we're waiting for somebody else to do it first. We need to do this ourselves as our island, and it will benefit all of us in the long run if we are on the front foot with this, as opposed to resisting change. And there is so much evidence out there that if you don't change, the change will be forced on you. And so that's where we really believe that government doesn't have the capacity or the mechanisms to work with businesses on an individual basis to kind of say, what about this and what about that, and have you tried this new product? And that's really the value of Beyond Plastic, is we can help you and we can work with you so that you can find a successful model that works for your businesses. So I really encourage everybody to join our upcoming webinars, the whole series, because they do fit together. And if you attend all 4, it will hopefully give you a lot of information that will help you navigate this. And then we are all available to help anybody who wants our help.
Yeah, change is disruptive, change is difficult, but change also presents opportunities. So, I mean, that's important to remember that. And I received a flyer today from somebody who's starting a new business, and it's centered around, environmentally friendly products. So, I mean, that's somebody who's moving ahead with a new business, so these are opportunities as well. Okay, well, thank you very much to everybody for attending.
Thank you, everyone. And we look forward to seeing you in 2 weeks' time at the next one.
Yep, have a great day.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye.